Park, Chicago. Here Jon Zaghloul, and we are back and ready for today's special guest. He's a sports reporter at ABC7, host of the Gimme the Hot Sauce podcast, and the TV voice of the Windy City Bulls. Please welcome Mark Schanowski to the program. Mark, great to have you on. How are you?
John, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Great to have you here. What do you make of the Bears-Dolphins game yesterday? We'll start there.
Hey, that was a lot of fun to watch. That was like an old AFL game. I'm showing my age here, but I used to watch those games that were broadcast on NBC back in the day, and there was very little defense played. Just teams running back and forth up and down the field. It's not always the highest quality of football, but it's fun to watch. And there was very little defense played in that game at Soldier Field on Sunday. But it was so much fun to watch Justin Fields just run wild. Some of the comments from the Miami Dolphins afterwards, guys saying that he's special and we're glad we don't have to face him again. That's not what people were saying early in Justin Fields' career. So, here's a young guy in only his second season with his second coaching staff, and he's made great strides. We're midway through this 2022 season, and I'm excited to see what he can do the rest of the way.
How encouraging was that performance yesterday and now these past 3 games in a row? It seems like he's really turning a corner.
Yeah, there's no question about it. And I think that some of the people who've been quick to criticize haven't really taken into consideration some of the liabilities that he was working with. A very shaky offensive line, substandard receiving crew, and basically, as I mentioned, having to work with a second offense in his second professional season. So, the knocks on Justin coming into the NFL were that he was a one-read quarterback. He didn't necessarily see the field. But when you play at a powerhouse like Ohio State, there was guys running free. He didn't have to make multiple reads because the first read was usually wide open. And, yeah, there were some adjustments there. Matt Nagy was obviously desperate to keep his job last year. That's why he was going to start Andy Dalton at the beginning of the year before he got hurt. So Justin was working at a disadvantage throughout his rookie season. Now he comes in with the new coaching staff. They're trying to figure out exactly how to utilize him best. And after, they had that mini bye, they came back with a brand new offensive team. Design runs, more rollouts, quick outlet passes where he's not going to have to deal with that pass rush all the time. And he's flourished under that. I mean, you can say they didn't win the game yesterday, but Justin Fields set an all-time NFL record for rushing yards by a quarterback in a single game. For all his critics out there, I still saw a lot of yeah buts on Twitter today because they didn't win the game. He couldn't lead them to that touchdown drive on their last 2 possessions. I tell you what, this kid is got all the athletic traits to be an outstanding NFL quarterback. And if they just continue to work around what he does best, get him some better weapons and a better offensive line with all this cap space they have next offseason, they could have something special because the Packers are definitely in decline. Minnesota, of course, is having a great year, but I don't think they're a juggernaut by any means. The Bears could be a team as soon as next season that could be challenging for a division championship.
How sustainable do you think this offense is, though? I mean, Baltimore certainly had their struggles with Lamar Jackson after their big year a couple of years ago. Do you think this is a sustainable offense for the Bears even moving forward into next year?
Well, you have to be careful when you run your quarterback too much. I mean, I will accept that for some of the people that said that, he's going to get hurt or you can't sustain that because most of his big plays have come out of scramble situations. The 61-yard touchdown run, he was bottled up in the pocket, was able to spin away, eluded another tackler, and then he was in the open field. And his speed in the open field is pretty incredible for a quarterback. He's got to be, if not the fastest, one of the fastest quarterbacks in the NFL. He's able to run away from defenders, which is impressive. But you don't want to expose your quarterback to big hits on design runs on a consistent basis. I think what they did in changing the offense, Luke Getsy saw that because they couldn't throw the ball downfield because their receivers weren't getting open, they had to do something to challenge the defense. So that meant more design runs for Justin Fields. He's really good at that. I think if you are, judicious in how you use him as a runner, you can sustain that to a certain degree, but you don't want him scrambling around and trying to avoid multiple tacklers because sooner or later he's going to not see somebody come from the blind side, and then you have, of course, the risk of injury.
You made a great point there. There were not a lot of wide receivers wide open downfield. A lot of people said yesterday, the Bears didn't throw downfield. Justin Fields can't throw downfield. Well, we have to remember nobody was open either, and that played a big role into why the Bears prioritized running with Fields.
Yeah, and it's interesting. They brought N'Keal Harry back off the injured list, who was a bigger body, but not a speed demon by any means. Chase Claypool, who they acquired in a trade last week, is a taller receiver, but he's not extremely fast. You saw on that play, which should have been pass interference late, that there was no separation. I mean, he was double covered and there was really no opening. At that point, I think Fields just thought, I'll throw a jump ball and see if my 6'4" receiver can pull it down. They should have gotten the flag, which obviously would have set them up for at least a tying field goal. And then it would have been a completely different storyline going into Monday. But, the receiving crew before they made these additions was really one of the worst in the league. They didn't have a lot of size outside of Darnell Mooney. They didn't have anybody who could really create any separation. And, I'm sure when Justin Fields was looking at down the field, there was nothing there. I mean, you can say, why don't you scan the field and find other options? Well, with that offensive line, basically, if his first option isn't open, he's running for his life.
Who lost the game more for the Bears yesterday, the reps or the defense?
Defense.
Defense.
Obviously, Miami got a touchdown on the block punt, so you take that one off the tally. But giving up 28 points in the way they did, I mean, Tua carved them up. He didn't have an incompletion until I think either late in the first half or early in the second. I mean, I think he reeled off like 11 in a row before he finally had one that was incomplete. Tua looked very good, by the way. Coming off all the concussion issues, I was wondering coming out of Alabama whether he had the arm strength to be a good NFL quarterback. But he's shown with that receiving crew that he's a dangerous quarterback. I thought he played really well yesterday. But, the defense, they traded away two of their best players in Robert Quinn and Roquan Smith, all part of the rebuilding strategy for Ryan Poles. I totally get that. But they've left that unit pretty well exposed. I mean, the two rookies they have back there, they've had their moments where they've looked okay, but they've got a big learning curve in terms of trying to defend the best receivers on the planet. So they're going to be vulnerable to big plays in the passing game. And right now, with the losing Roquan Smith, who was your leading tackler, a guy who's all over the field playing sideline to sideline, they're vulnerable in a lot of different ways. So they're going to have to outscore teams to win games the rest of the way. But I think from a fan base that's seen kind of boring teams the last few years, just being in games, 35-32, they scored over 30 points against the Patriots. That's fun to watch.
If Ryan Poles builds around this team, does stuff in the offseason, drafts responsibly, what do you see this Bears team being next year?
Well, as I mentioned, I think they could contend for the NFC North title next year, assuming, of course, that Ryan Poles is aggressive in the free agent market. We've seen this with our baseball teams, with the Bulls, where they've got cap space, but we couldn't get this guy, so we're going to spread it around to a bunch of lesser players. That's not the strategy I hope that Ryan Poles. Football is different than basketball. In basketball, you get one or two stars, you can turn things around in a hurry. Football is the ultimate team sport. You need all three phases to play well. So I understand that they need a couple of offensive linemen, they need a couple of receivers, they need an edge pass rusher, they need another cornerback. They'll get some of that in the draft, and they'll get some of it in free agency, but I don't know if you can fill 6, 7, 8 holes in one off season.
Mark Schanowski here on Sports Talk Chicago. Mark, let's talk Bulls now. What's your take on their season so far?
Bulls, you mean? Mention Bears, okay.
Yeah,
the Bulls right now as we speak are 5-6 with a rematch coming up against the Toronto Raptors on Monday night. They've been very inconsistent, and I think that once again it's the injury issue. We've talked about injuries with the Bulls for as long as I can remember, dating back to Derrick Rose having that terrible knee injury in the 2012 playoffs, and they just can't seem to get out from under this. They had their bench was a real strength in the first few games, with Andre Drummond and Goran Dragic showing a lot of really good veteran savvy and good chemistry between those two, working the pick and roll and some nice lob plays. But then Drummond gets hurt. He takes a hard fall, sprains his shoulder. Can't blame the medical staff. Like I see so many people on Twitter, fire everybody, bring in new doctors, new trainers, which they have done, by the way, in a lot of areas. Now, they have a new training staff. Some injuries you just can't control. The Zach LaVine thing is a bit of a mystery to everybody. He had the scope done early in the offseason. He talked about in training camp he had no issues with the knee. His explosion was back. He felt better than he has in a long time. And yet he's missing games. He missed the game on Sunday where that allowed Toronto to send double teams at DeMar DeRozan as soon as he crossed half court. Nick Nurse is a very good coach for the Raptors, and he knew with Zach out, they really couldn't hurt his team if they were going to sell out with double teaming DeRozan. So hopefully in the rematch on Monday night, he'll be able to play, and they won't be able to be so aggressive and throw caution to the wind and double teaming DeMar DeRozan. And Billy Donovan's had to adjust his rotations. He was doing some experimenting early on, trying to play 10, 11 guys. Now, because of injuries, he's kind of tightened that up a little bit. But you won't really know until Zach is able to play regularly what this team can do. And the hope is, they finally got a positive report on Lonzo Ball last week that they feel like this latest arthroscopic procedure, which showed there was something that was pushing on his nerve in that knee. Maybe Lonzo Ball can come back around Christmas time, and then maybe the second half of the season they can make a strong run and be, trending upwards going into the playoffs instead of last year when they had all the injuries and they were kind of limping into the playoffs.
So who needs to step up here? I mean, if everyone's going to be double teaming DeRozan and LaVine's still trying to return, who should be stepping up for the Bulls?
Well, you need to get some scoring from other sources besides their big three. And Patrick Williams has been more aggressive in the last week. I know in talking to Stacey King, he had a conversation with him on the road before the game in San Antonio. And also Patrick's older brother, I guess, gave him a really hard time about being too passive on the court. So we've seen him, especially early in games, trying to drive to the basket. He did get his shot blocked a few times at the rim by Christian Coloco in that game in Toronto. But, just to see him be more aggressive, I think is a positive thing at this point. Kobe White is out injured right now. He's a guy that could give you some scoring off the bench, but right now he is sidelined. They're going to have to use that second unit to be a strength for them. I think in the games that they've won this year, they've dominated the bench points. And I think when you've got Drummond and Dragic and Kobe White and Caruso playing on the second team, I think and Javonte Green. I don't want to forget about him. That's a really strong unit that's going to be better than most teams' bench groups. Now Caruso starting, you saw in the game against Toronto on Sunday, they just dared him to shoot. When they were double teaming DeRozan, they were rotating off Caruso. He had a couple of threes late that might have changed the outcome of that game, and he misfired. And that's not his strength. He's an effort guy. He's a defensive player who gets you steals and makes plays in transition, but he's not a great 3-point shooter. And now that he's starting when Zach is out, he's going to have to be a shooter, and he has not been able to do that through the early part of the season.
Do we know when Zach LaVine's going to return?
He's supposed to play on Monday night, but, right now it looks like back-to-backs are going to be very iffy. He did play a back-to-back last week, which kind of surprised a lot of people, but he was not nearly as effective in the second game as he was in the first. I think they're going to be very careful with him through the first half of the season. I know that really rubs a lot of people the wrong way because he signed the max contract. He had the surgery. People are saying you're supposed to be our 1A player along with DeMar. Both those guys made the All-Star team last year, and the expectation was that both would do it again. But Zach is off to an okay start, but he's missing a lot of games, and he's not really been able to finish at the rim like we've been able to see in the past. And he's made some cryptic comments to some of the beat writers in terms of saying that he's had to reevaluate how he plays. He referenced Michael Jordan changing his game after his retirement. But MJ came back, when he returned, he was, he would have been 33 when he came back. Zach is 27. So you'd hope that Zach would still have some high-flying years left in him before he starts thinking about the standstill turnaround jumper game.
How did this happen? How did this all happen to Zach LaVine?
Well, I think part of it is put a lot of stress on that knee over the years. He's always been a high flyer, dating back to high school and his 1 year at UCLA, the 2 slam dunk championships that he won. And Zach has always been a guy that if he had a chance to lay it in or dunk it, he dunked it. He wanted to get on the highlight reels. He wanted to, posterize guys at the rim. And, he had the ACL injury with the Timberwolves. He came back, was back to 100%. But I think that, I've never had a knee surgery, but I'm sure that when you have that, there's scar tissue. There's things that make it feel maybe not 100%. And now Zach had the second procedure done during this past off season. So that knee is probably, even though it's for a normal person, it's 100%. For an elite athlete who wants to jump over 7-footers and dunk the ball, well, maybe there is a little bit of hesitation there. I hope that whatever mental issues that he may have, he can get past in the coming weeks, and that when we get into the second half of the season, we'll see the old Zach. But, he came into the league at 19. I believe this is his 9th year. So he's been around for a long time, and he's put some miles on that knee.
What's your expectation for the rest of this season for the Bulls?
Hard to say because the Eastern Conference is so strong this year. Look at what Cleveland is doing. Who would have thought that Cleveland is going to be a legitimate contender post LeBron James? I mean, LeBron really made that into a story. He went back. He won Cleveland their first championship in some 50 years. And you thought that after he finally left for good to go to the Lakers, that it would be a lot of dark times for Cleveland. But they've built it up the right way, through the draft and through really smart trades. Kobe Altman, their general manager, has done a great job, and they've won 8 games in a row. They're 8-1, right behind Milwaukee at 9-0. Cleveland is definitely a factor in the East now, which just gives you one more strong team, along with Milwaukee, Boston, Philadelphia, Miami, Toronto. We can go on and on. Brooklyn is the great unknown. They just fired Steve Nash, or they left a part of mutual agreement, which is always a funny thing for me to hear. I've heard that mutual agreement story before. It never usually rings true. But
Right.
So just, my larger point is that to try to analyze exactly where the Bulls are going to fit in this mix, I think Milwaukee and Boston are the 2 teams at the top. I think Cleveland, right, has shown they can be there, and Philadelphia has a very strong team. James Harden's going to be out for a couple of weeks, maybe up to a month, but he'll be back, and I'm sure he'll be strong for the playoffs. So the thing that you want to do, you want to finish in the top 6 to avoid that play-in tournament. Bulls are off to a little bit of a tough start now at 5-6, and they've got some tough games coming up. They've got 2 games against Denver. They play the Pelicans. They've got the game against Toronto on Monday night. So the next couple of weeks, they're going to have to make sure that they can hopefully at least split these next 4 to 6 games and not dig yourself a big hole early in the season. But long term, I think when they get everybody back, this is a very good team. I think their second unit is a big strength, and I would anticipate that they'd be in that 45 to 48 win range, which would put you somewhere between 6 and 9. You'd rather be 6 than be in that play-in tournament, but we'll just have to see how things shake out in the East.
This might be a little bit too soon, but have the Bulls lost their championship window already before it even started?
That's a really good question, because DeMar DeRozan only signed a 3-year contract, which means they're going to have to decide after this year, are you going to extend DeMar, who's 33 years old, in his 14th season? He's playing the best basketball of his career, but there's a shelf life on everybody. Father Time is undefeated, and you have to wonder how far would the Bulls be willing to go to extend DeMar. And, DeMar flirted with signing with the Lakers. He's told people openly on various podcasts and radio interviews that he thought he was going to sign with the Lakers during that offseason, but they went with Russell Westbrook instead. Huge mistake on the Lakers' part, because they're 2-7 right now and really floundering. But I think the Bulls are going to have to decide, can we win? Can we really challenge with a championship with our core of Zach LaVine, DeMar, and Nikola Vucevic? Because Vuce is a free agent at the end of this year. And he's 30. I believe he just turned 32. So, are you going to re-sign Vuce and DeMar at big money, which basically closes you out of free agency, and that's your team? They don't have a first-round draft pick this year. They do have Portland's future number 1, but that's lottery protected. And I don't think the Trailblazers, even though they're off to a nice start, I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. So they're not going to have a first-round pick. If you re-sign DeRozan to an extension and Vuce to a new contract, that's your team for the foreseeable future. And as much as I think this is a good team, as much as I like Billy Donovan as a coach, I don't think they can contend for a championship with this squad.
Wow. But that makes sense. I mean, I don't disagree with you. I think that's probably a little bit of an alarm for Bulls fans, thinking this team is better than what they might be.
Well, I think that last year, they got off to that great start, and then the injuries and the COVID missing games hit, and they kind of dropped back a little bit after the All-Star break. I think that, NBA is so good right now. There are so many good young players. The Bulls, even though it seems new because we have Billy Donovan coming in, as he hasn't been there all that long. You have a new front office led by Arturas Karnisovas, and you feel like, hey, this is a young team with a lot of growth potential. But really, they're one of the older rosters in the league because of that bench group. They've got some veterans on there. You look at which players do you look at as future young stars? I think we already know what Kobe White is. He's in his 4th season. I think he's a guy who can score off the bench, but I wouldn't say that he has all-star potential. Patrick Williams in his 3rd season, he missed almost all of year 2 because of the wrist injury. He kind of fights his confidence. The one thing I mentioned this on our podcast, that I think that what Patrick should probably do is limit his interviews. It seems like he psychoanalyzes himself after every game. And I think that, sometimes for a young player, if you think too much, that's going to inhibit what you can do on the court. Because when he just plays, I mean, the guy's 6'7". He's a very physical guy that can go strong to the rim. he can get some things done. But, he's the fourth pick in the draft. And unfortunately for Bulls fans, he was the fourth pick in a three-player draft. There were three elites, and then the Bulls moved up from 7 to 4, and there was a menagerie of guys to take. They took Patrick Williams. People who say that AK blew that pick, well, there wasn't a lot after him that looks like star potential either. So, Patrick is 21. I know, just like we talked about with Justin Fields earlier, the fans are impatient. They're quick to bury the kid. I think that there's a lot of potential there. Remember, he missed almost all of last season. I think that he can still be a very good player, but I don't see him as a guy that's going to be an all-star down the road. I think he's more of a supplemental piece than he is a core piece.
What's this mean for the Bulls for the rest of this year, next year, moving forward? I mean, are they going to have to rebuild again? Like, what could be the future plan for them at this point?
Well, that depends what happens over the next 2.5 months until we get to the mid-February when the trade deadline comes. If AK decides that they're not going to re-sign, or they will only sign Vucevic at their price, you know how this works. They're going to talk to his agent and say, "Hey, what do you think it's going to? What's it going to take to bring him back on an extension? We would like to bring him back, but we'd like it to be on a team-friendly deal." Well, this would be Vucevic's last opportunity to get a big contract in the marketplace. They may decide, that it's not going to work out, and maybe they trade Vuce, and then you're in a situation where making the playoffs this year becomes an issue, and then DeMar DeRozan might start looking around and going, do I want to commit the last years of my career to a team that has no chance to win a championship? And he may tell the Bulls in the offseason, maybe you might want to think about moving me along because I only got X number of years left and I'd like to contend for a championship. So, I thought AK and Mark Eversley did a wonderful job the first year of evaluating everybody, blew up the roster, very aggressive in bringing in DeRozan. I thought they gave up too much for Vuce. Vuce is a very good player, but when you consider what they gave up, Wendell Carter Jr. did not distinguish himself here, but he's playing well with the Orlando Magic, and they gave up two number ones. The first pick, which was the 9th pick in the draft, turned out to be Franz Wagner, who NBA people love. 6'10" guy who can play on the wing, who can shoot the three, would have fit very nicely in this club. That's not to say the Bulls would have drafted Franz Wagner if they had that pick, but they probably would have because Arturas has a good international background and they needed shooting. I know I'm going around the block on this, but there are so many unknowns right now. They could decide, if they're under 500 at the trade deadline, maybe they make a bold move and trade one of the veterans. I think more likely they're going to stay the course and reevaluate in the offseason.
Mark Schanowski is still here on Sports Talk Chicago. Mark, a few more questions before we finish up. First off, the Windy City Bulls, how'd you become their TV voice?
Well, a few years back, I got a chance to fill in actually it was Neil Funk to do a game. And I know you've done a lot of play-by-play, and I always fantasize maybe is the right word, but I always thought about the possibility of doing play-by-play. I mean, I remember when I was in high school, I was a huge NBA fan, and I would listen to a lot of games on the radio. And I was living in Milwaukee, and I really liked the cold weather. And I used to tell my buddies, when I get into my career, I'm going to be the voice of the Phoenix Suns. I want to get in the warm weather and call basketball. Well, I never, how circumstances change in broadcasting. I got kind of pushed down the TV news path, and I have no regrets. It's been wonderful for myself and my family, and I have no regrets about it. But you always have that thought in the back of your head. Geez, I wonder what it would have been like if I'd gone the play-by-play route. Things were a lot different back then. If you were trying to break in, there weren't as many opportunities. Now that we have games being streamed with basically every minor league team in every sport, there's great opportunities for young broadcasters to kind of see what they have in terms of their talent and have their work seen by people with larger teams. But back then, if you didn't get a chance to call minor league baseball or something like that, there really weren't a lot of opportunities. So get back to your original question. I got a chance to fill in for Neil. I love doing it. And after the season, I was trying to think, well, how can I get more opportunities? I reached out to a couple of college conferences, but I had one game on my resume. It was kind of hard to sell myself as a play-by-play guy. So, I talked to some people I knew in the Bulls organization. I said, are there any opportunities at Windy City? They had someone locked in at play-by-play, but they said, well, would you be interested in doing color? So I did color for a couple of years. And then our play-by-play guy relocated with his family out to Colorado. And, I asked him, hey, can I switch over? And they said, that'd be great. We'd love to have you. I was able to convince my buddies Kendall Gill and Will Perdue to help me out on some games this year. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really thrilled about doing a full season of play-by-play, and getting a chance to work with good friends like Kendall and Will makes it even more special.
Yeah, how's it feel to have a Bulls pre and post game reunion for the Windy City Bulls booth?
It's been fantastic because, when I left, we stayed in contact, and, the guys would say, we really miss having you on the show. And, it was kind of hard for me to watch for a long time because, I'd done that for 14 years. It was a big part of my life. Jason Goff does a nice job on the show, but, you always feel like when you do something that long, you feel a sense of ownership, and you feel like, I helped that show grow, and I wish I was still a part of it. So when I found out that I was going to get the opportunity to do play-by-play this year, first thing I did was reach out to those guys. And, there are going to be some conflicts where there's a Bulls game, Windy City Bulls game at the same time, so they won't be available. But, they'll probably do half to 2/3 of the games, and just get a chance to work with them again is really special. I mean, we did the game on Saturday, the home opener, and that was the only game we were going to have both of them. It was a 3-man booth for that game, and it was so comfortable and so easy. I hope the viewers that they got a chance to watch it on NBC Sports Chicago enjoyed it. We do all 24 home games. I believe 14 are going to be live, and 10, because of conflicts with either the Bulls or Blackhawks, will be on tape delay. And a lot of them re-air later in the evening or the next day. So I hope people get a chance to sample them on NBC Sports Chicago, because they have a nice squad. They've got some recognizable names, some kids with Chicago backgrounds, and hopefully they're going to be really competitive and have a chance to make the playoffs in the G League this year.
Mark, before we finish up today, last question. How close were you to not being in the Bulls locker room when they won the finals in 1993?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was very close. I've told a story before that I was sent there as the feature reporter to go along with Tim Weigel at Channel 7 back in 1993. And it looked like that game might be going the wrong way. Game 6, Phoenix was charging late, and it looked like we might be looking ahead to a Game 7. So Tim asked me with our extra shooter, he said, why don't you go out in the concourse or even outside if you want and grab some Phoenix Suns fans and get their predictions on a Game 7, kind of the man on the street thing, which is not one of my favorite things in local news, but every station does it. So I'm in the concourse. I actually saw Paxson's winning shot on a TV monitor in the concourse. So after that, I charged downstairs and helped him with the winning locker room. But we thought for a while there that there was going to be a Game 7, but fortunately, MJ and the group had other ideas. And Phoenix, that was Charles Barkley's fantastic season. He was the MVP. He played exceptionally well in the finals. They had a good chance. Phoenix had the best record in the league that year. They thought they were going to force that Game 7, but of course, everybody remembers the play. They threw it into Horace inside, back out to John Paxson, drains the 3, and then they get the block shot of Kevin Johnson on the other end. So, yeah, it was a whirlwind 15 minutes or so for me, and fortunately, it ended up the right way. A moment that Bulls fans will never forget, something that John Paxson will never forget, and that was championship number 3.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for joining me. Always a pleasure. Best wishes with Windy City and with Give Me the Hot Sauce, and looking forward to catching up again real soon. Always appreciate it.
Thanks, John. Yeah, I want to encourage people to check out Give Me the Hot Sauce with Stacy if they haven't done it. We do a new show every week. We do it on YouTube, so you can watch it. We do the show live, normally on Thursday evenings, but we're kind of working around Stacy's schedule right now. But we have a ton of fun doing it, a lot of laughs. If you can't watch it live, check it out on either YouTube or any podcast carrier the next day.